The first thing I saw when I landed was a text from my cousin Dana. It said, "You need to call me before you go home. It is important. Do not go home first. Call me." I had been in Nairobi for 6 months. Not on vacation. Not on a work trip with hotel breakfasts and expense reports. I had been running a water infrastructure project for a non-governmental organization in one of the driest regions of East Africa. The agreement required full presence. No social media. Extremely limited phone contact. I had written all of this down before I left. I had printed a schedule with the exact dates, the contact protocol, and the name of the organization's field director in case of emergency. I had handed it to my mother personally. I had emailed it to my brother Elliot. I had done everything a responsible person does when they are going somewhere, remote for 6 months, and they need their family to know they are reachable, but not constantly available. I called Dana from the arrivals hall of JFK Airport. My bags were still at my feet. The fluorescent lights above me were the particular harsh white of airports at 6 a.m. I had been in the air for 17 hours. Dana picked up immediately. She did not say hello. She said, "Mara, how much do you know?" I said, "About what?" She exhaled. Then she told me my grandmother had died 11 weeks earlier. 11 weeks. She had been gone for almost 3 months, and I had not known. The organization had not forwarded any personal communications during the project, which was the agreement, and my family had not used the emergency contact protocol I had provided, which was the only channel that would have reached me immediately. My grandmother died, and my family did not find the emergency contact sheet, or they found it and chose not to use it. I stood very still in the middle of the arrivals hall, and I let Dana keep talking. She told me that my brother Elliot had organized the memorial, that he had spoken at the service, that he had told the assembled family and friends that he was handling the estate, that in the weeks following the memorial he had sold the family home in Connecticut, a 4-bedroom colonial that had been in our family for 31 years, and had distributed what he described to various relatives as the proceeds of the estate. I said, "Did anyone contact Gerald Stein?" Dana was quiet. I said, "Dana, did anyone contact Gerald Stein?" She said, "Elliot told everyone he had already handled everything with a local attorney. He said it was done. He said there was nothing left to manage." I said, "That is not what I asked. Gerald Stein was Grandma's attorney for 31 years. Did anyone contact Gerald Stein specifically?" Another silence. "Then, I do not think so, Mara." I picked up my bags. I said, "I need you to call me a car to your apartment. I will explain everything when I get there. Here is what Elliot had done while I was building water filtration systems in East Africa. He had held the memorial without attempting to reach me through any channel other than my personal cell phone, which I had told him explicitly would not receive international messages during the project. He had stood in front of our grandmother's friends and neighbors and spoken about her life and her legacy, while her other grandchild, the one she had raised alongside him, was sleeping in a field tent 11 time zones away with no idea she was gone. He had sold the Connecticut home in 5 weeks. 5 weeks after she died. The house where we had spent every Thanksgiving for 31 years. The house with the kitchen that smelled like cardamom and the back porch where she had taught me to identify constellations by name. Gone in 5 weeks. And then he had done the thing that I keep coming back to when I think about my brother. Not because it was the most legally significant action he took, but because it tells you everything about who he is and what he thought of me. He held a dinner, an actual dinner party, at a restaurant in New Haven. He invited 6 relatives, and he sat at the head of the table and he distributed envelopes with checks inside. Checks drawn from what he described as Grandma's personal accounts, which he had been added to years ago as a joint account holder for convenience, so she could pay bills when she was not feeling well. He distributed these envelopes with the energy of a man who has done something generous, who has handled a difficult situation so that others would not have to. My cousin Dana was at that dinner. She told me Elliot made a toast. He said, "Grandma would have wanted her family taken care of. I am just making sure that happens." He did not mention me at the dinner. Not once. Not as an absent family member. Not as someone who was overseas and could not be reached. I did not exist in that room. I had been edited out of the family in the same way you edit a person out of a photograph. Cleanly. Without visible seam. Dana said she almost said something. She said she looked around the table and realized that every person there had already accepted their envelope, and that saying something would have meant giving hers back. She kept it. She has apologized to me for that 4 times since. I have told her each time that I understand. Money changes the way people calculate their courage. I slept on Dana's couch that night. I did not sleep well. Not because of the jet lag, though that was real, but because I kept doing the calculation over and over in my head. The way you do when you are trying to find the error in a system and you keep running the same numbers and getting the same result. Elliot had moved fast. 6 months is a very specific window, long enough that people stop expecting you to be reachable, short enough that legal processes could still be navigated without obvious obstruction. He had not waited for me to come home. He had not tried the emergency contact protocol. He had simply acted as if I did not exist and counted on the fact that by the time I returned, everything would be settled and signed and distributed, and the only thing left would be a fait accompli that I would have to accept, because fighting it would mean fighting the entire family, and the money was already gone. It was a good plan. If I had been a different person, it would have worked. But I am a person who, when I was 23 years old, sat in a lawyer's office next to my grandmother and listened to an old man in a blue tie say something I have never forgotten. He said, "The most important document a person can ever sign is the one nobody knows about." I had been 23. I had not fully understood what he meant. I understood it now. I called Gerald Stein at 11 p.m. from Dana's couch. He answered himself, which told me he had been expecting my call, which told me he already knew I was home. Gerald's office was in New Haven, on the 3rd floor of a building that had not been renovated since 1987 and smelled pleasantly of old books and radiator heat. I was there at 8 a.m. the next morning. He was already at his desk in a blue tie. He always wore a blue tie. I had never seen him in any other color. He poured me coffee without asking. He sat down. He folded his hands, and he told me the following. My grandmother had revised her will 14 months before she died. The revision had been witnessed by 2 people, notarized by a 3rd, and filed with the probate court in New Haven County on a Thursday afternoon in October. Gerald had the filing receipt in the folder in front of him. The revised will named me as the sole beneficiary of her estate, not the primary beneficiary, the sole beneficiary. It excluded Elliot by name. It included a written explanation, in my grandmother's own words, dictated to Gerald and transcribed verbatim, stating that she had observed Elliot's financial behavior toward family members over a period of years and had found it to be, in her words, predatory and dishonest. She had written that. My grandmother, who never raised her voice, who made cardamom cake every Thanksgiving, who taught me the names of constellations from the back porch of the Connecticut house, she had sat in this office and dictated those words about her own grandson, predatory and dishonest. And then she had signed the document and filed it with the court. Gerald told me the estate at the time of her death was valued at approximately $1.2 million. The Connecticut house, a brokerage account, a certificate of deposit, and 2 parcels of land in Vermont she had purchased in 1981 that had appreciated significantly over 40 years. Elliot had sold the Connecticut house. He had distributed approximately $180,000 from the joint convenience account. He had done all of this operating under the assumption that no formal will existed, because the only will he knew about was an outdated document from 11 years earlier that had never been properly filed, and that named him as a co-beneficiary. He did not know about the revision. He did not know Gerald existed in any current capacity. He did not know that 11 months before she died, my grandmother had walked into this office, sat in the chair I was sitting in now, and quietly rewritten everything. Gerald looked at me over his glasses. He said, Your brother has been managing an estate he has no legal authority over. Every transaction he has conducted is challengeable. Would you like to proceed? I said yes. The probate filing happened that same afternoon. Gerald moved with the efficiency of a man who had been waiting for the right moment and knew exactly what to do when it arrived. The court received the filing at 2:47 p.m. A case number was assigned by close of business. Elliot's attorney, a local man he had hired in a hurry, Gerald told me later, someone without significant estate litigation experience, received a certified notification the following morning. Gerald told me he could hear the surprise in the attorney's voice when he called to discuss. The attorney had not known about the revised will. Elliot had not told him to look for one. He had simply assumed, as Elliot had assumed, that the only relevant document was the old one. The buyers of the Connecticut house received notification that the sale was being contested, on the grounds that the seller had no legal authority to transfer title. Their attorney called Gerald within 4 hours. Gerald described the call to me as brief and productive. My cousin Dana called me that evening. She said Elliot had called her in a panic. She said he had used a word I will not repeat. She said he had told her this was my revenge for missing the memorial, that I was doing this out of spite, that if I actually loved the family, I would let it go. I want to be honest about what I felt when Dana told me that. I did not feel vindicated. I did not feel powerful. I felt something much smaller and much sadder, which was the confirmation of something I had suspected for a long time. That Elliot had always understood our family as a resource to be managed, and that he had always understood me as the least vigilant part of that resource. He had been wrong about the second part. Elliot called me 4 days after the probate filing. I let it go to voicemail. He called again that evening. I let that go too. On the third call, I picked up. He did not apologize. I want to be clear about that. He did not say, "I am sorry I sold the house without telling you." He did not say, "I am sorry I distributed money that was not mine to distribute." He did not say, "I am sorry I held a memorial and a dinner and toasted to Grandma's memory while editing you out of the room entirely." He said, "This is going to destroy the family." I said, "Elliot, the will is filed with the probate court. It has been there for 14 months. It was there before she died. It was there when you sold the house. It was there when you held your dinner." It did not move. He said, "You were not here, you left. You went to Africa for 6 months, and you were not reachable and someone had to handle things." I said, "You had the emergency contact information. You chose not to use it." He said, "I did not think." I said, "I know. That was your mistake." I hung up. Gerald finalized the legal proceedings over the following 7 months. The Connecticut property sale was voided. A recovery order was issued for the distributed funds. Elliot did not contest it. His attorney advised him that contesting a properly filed will with a specific exclusion clause and a named sole beneficiary was a case he could not win. The estate resolved on a Tuesday morning in March, 8 months after I had stood in the arrivals hall of JFK with my bags at my feet and read a text that said, "Call me before you go home." I did not keep everything. That is the part of this story that people sometimes find surprising, as if the point of what happened was accumulation. It was not. The point was never the money. The point was the document, the one nobody knew about, the one my grandmother had walked into an office and signed on a Thursday afternoon because she had been watching and thinking and deciding for years, and she had wanted to make sure that, when the moment came, the right person was protected. I established a foundation in her name. It funds clean water infrastructure projects in sub-Saharan Africa. The first grant went to the organization I had been working with in Nairobi. The project we funded provides clean water to 11,000 people in a region that had none. I told Gerald about the foundation when it was established. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She would have liked that. She always said the best thing you can do with something valuable is make sure it goes somewhere it is actually needed." I think about that sometimes. About my grandmother, sitting in Gerald's office in a blue tie, afternoon 14 months before she died, dictating words about predatory behavior and dishonest conduct, signing a document that would sit quietly in a filing system for Over a year doing nothing, waiting. She was not angry when she did it. I am certain of that. She was not vindictive. She was simply precise. She had looked at her family clearly, the way you look at a structure you have built to determine which parts will hold and which will not. And she had made her calculations and she had acted on them. She built me a floor. Again. From a filing cabinet in New Haven, from 11 time zones away, from 14 months before I would ever need it. It held, it always held, because she always made sure it would.